I clicked it. It's coming. There we go.
All right. Well, I guess good morning, everybody, and welcome into my presentation about some exciting things that are going on. There will not be any explosions. We are in the virtual world, so I'm trying not to, make anything go boom. But let's go ahead and get that presentation on the screen for everybody. So the title of my talk, Here Comes the Boom, Adapting and Aligning Chemistry Courses Across Multiple Modalities, started out as kind of a conversation piece that I had with Dr. Alex Marriott, my previous supervisor here in the Division of Arts and Sciences. And the question was that I proposed was, hey, Alex, I've got all these great ideas and great thoughts that I put together with chemistry. How can I talk about and share those great ideas? Because I've used them in a number of places. I've used them here at ACC. I've used them in my adjunct roles at other campuses that I've taught at and continue to teach at. And I wanted to, share those great ideas and share the passion I have for chemistry and the passion I have for mixing the modalities of instruction across these multiple items. So for those of you guys who are not as familiar with the science side, this over here is called the whoosh bottle. It's a demonstration of a combustion reaction. And over here we have elephant toothpaste, which is a kinetics reaction based on the catalysis of catalyzing potassium iodine to react with hydrogen peroxide to generate oxygen and water. My microbiologist wife is glad that I got that part right. So I'm Brian Berger. I have been here now almost 9 years here at ACC. I am a chemistry instructor, faculty lead in the science department, and the distance education faculty fellow. My office and phone number are listed here along with my email. My academic interest in chemistry have really kind of shifted in the last 3 or 4 years. I have done hybrid courses for a number of years now, but online instruction was something that I was not ever really sure we would ever get to in chemistry until that thing happened about 48 months ago that we really don't talk too much about, that thing. And so it gave me an opportunity to kind of refine my passion, refine my energy, and kind of build myself into this idea of designing, implementing, and building these virtual labs and utilizing LMSs for different types of instructional support. So I've used Blackboard and D2L Brightspace to help deliver my courses here at ACC and then also at Lone Star College where I teach as an adjunct. And I'm stealing this from Haley as well, but I am a big advocate for online and hybrid instruction in STEM. I want to make sure that we provide our students with opportunities because many of our students here at ACC are working multiple jobs, working long 40-hour-a-week jobs, maybe working shift work where they can't attend in a regular time period. And we want to make sure that we're providing our students with those opportunities for learning and instruction. And with the avenues that have been opened up with online and hybrid courses, and Aaron can also attest to this too. Hi, Aaron, I'm going to put you on the spot for a millisecond. We are providing our students with an opportunity to learn in methods or modalities that were not possible or were not visited 4 years ago. Now, this quote kind of really got me kind of excited as well about chemistry. I saw this from one of my friends on social media. But when you take a new step in life, it's always scary. So in 2020, when we shifted modalities from in-person to online, it was a very scary time period. We've never done it before. It was uncharted. But sometimes in life, those are the most exciting opportunities. I like, change. I like these opportunities for growth and development. And I like these opportunities to, expand what we know and what we can share with other people. And so facing a lot of these challenges head on have allowed us to grow and develop our students and provide our students with unique tools and skill sets that are going to make them amazing no matter what career path they go on to. So kind of opening things up, if you guys can name one unique tool, teaching method, or technology that you guys use in your classroom now that you did not use before the COVID pandemic, y'all can use the chat, you can pipe in with the microphone, but what's one thing that you guys use now that you guys may not have used in your classroom instruction before the pandemic?
Well, I can
Collaborate. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Blackboard Collaborate.
That's a good one. Collaborate.
I would agree with that. I use Blackboard Collaborate in the virtual meeting room a lot more. I use it with my, obviously my online class, but I also use it with my in-person students. And when I do reviews now for exams, I do a HyFlex. And so I allow students to either come in person or students to actually log in through the virtual meeting room. And then that way they can stay home or they can come in person. and then I record it and stuff. And so that's not something I would have done before.
No, definitely. I found myself in Collaborate, in Teams. I started out using Collaborate quite regularly, but now I use Teams for a lot of my meetings with students. However, I still use Blackboard Collaborate. If I want to make a short video, I've found that Collaborate's my favorite way to make videos for my classes. And then I'm able to download them, do some edits or revisions, either using Photo Legacy or Clipchamp to kind of put them together. And then I'm able to get them back out to my students either through the OneDrive for my live sessions or through one of my other shared drive files that I have access to. Nancy, yes, the visible body atlas that you guys have for anatomy is amazing. You get a great perspective. It's like if you've seen Good Doctor when Dr. Sean Murphy's looking at the body, it's like, wow, that's pretty awesome. All right. So I want to not run out of time, but here's kind of an outline of where I want to go with today's kind of conversation. So leading up to the pandemic, I was thinking about this. I felt like I was in a bit of a rut going into the early part of 2020. I was teaching the same course, Chem 1405. I had very little variation in how I was doing my courses. I had lecture PowerPoints, I would work problem sets. And I remember in fall 19, I had taught 3 face-to-face sections of Chem 1405. It was my first semester not doing a hybrid class in about 3 years. And I kind of felt it was very repetitive and a little boring. And I know you guys are like, well, Brian, you're like one of the most energetic people we know. How's that happen? Well, it just gets to a point where you're kind of like, well, it's the same thing again and again. But in the spring, I began kind of thinking, well, how can I develop some things a little different? I had my hybrid class back. Dean Matula had graciously said, Brian, you're allowed to go teach this hybrid course again. So I looked at new methods of instruction there. I looked at possibly starting to look at a couple of virtual lab simulations at the beginning before the pandemic happened. But when COVID happened, it really rekindled my passion. It opened up this really interesting avenue of being a content creator that I had not really done as much since I'd started here at ACC. Yeah, sure, I'd made a few labs, I'd made a few problem sets, but I'd never gotten to actually go deep into my curriculum and rebuild how I teach, how I lecture, how I do problem sets, how I conduct problem sessions. And so how these models adapted, I was able to adapt for hybrid courses and online classes. And then in 2021, a friend of mine, Dr. Heather Brazier, who works at Lone Star College University Park, reached out to me about teaching some online sections for Lone Star College University Park in their 8-week model. And so I began looking at 8-week courses for General Chemistry 1 and General Chemistry 2, taking some of the virtual labs that I built here at ACC and applying them to what I was doing at Lone Star, applying my problem sets, applying my lecture videos, and getting kind of a nice little ahead of the curve a little bit, because I know ACC began looking at that success initiative for the 8-week courses kind of around a little bit after that time period. It gave me some great insights that I was able to share with my colleagues here at ACC. And again, I'm also looking at how we can change and grow these opportunities. Again, I know this is not for everybody. I know everybody's kind of, a little nervous or a little panicked about certain modalities of instruction. So I don't want to force anything on anybody, but rather I want to, encourage people to look outside the box. I just came from Jennifer and Cindy's talk talking about, leading with grit. And we all have grit. We've all gone through a lot. We've all changed. We've all challenged ourselves in new ways. We have grown in our skill sets with Blackboard and our skill sets with building videos and our changes with teaching classes. Aaron, I like that you mentioned your high flexing with your review set. And of course, I also want to talk about some future things that I want to work on as I continue in this mode or modality of instruction. So before 2020, I had PowerPoint lectures. My exams were on paper. I did mix multiple choice and open-ended questions. But for the most part, my exams were done the traditional, here's the Scantron, here's the paper, all those kind of fun things. For my intro classes, my students would work in groups of 2 or 3, depending on the room placement or availability of lab partners. And I would collect a lab sheet at the end of the period and grade it by hand. And for my Gen Chem students, Dr. Kempen and I, we were using lab notebooks with carbon paper where students would write in the lab notebook. They would do their pre-lab, their objective, their materials, equipment, procedure, and safety requirements. They would complete the lab by collecting their data and observations, and then go home and do their post-lab questions in their lab notebook. For hybrid courses, I still have my lecture videos over PowerPoint files. We had started doing that in the chemistry department even before I arrived. Dr. Kempen was kind of the champion for our flipped classroom. And so she kind of gave me encouragement. I picked up an iPad. We began making videos using a really cool program called Explain Everything. And it was a really wonderful idea to get those videos out for students. In fact, some of those early videos that I made on Vesper theory, valence bond, and molecular orbital theory, I'm still using today because I really like the quality of what I did back in 2015. But with our hybrid courses, we did the flipped classroom. They watch the videos, come to class, work problems. They do some labs in person, may have a few simulations, not very many. And the lecture exams were given in a testing center. We didn't have any online sections back up until 2020, and we did not have any 8-week sections in our chemistry department at that time. I think Philip O'Brien had started piloting Geology 1301 in 8 weeks in the spring of 2020, but that was the only course that we had at that time that was in 8 weeks. But then COVID happened. I remember I was at a Rockets game. I'm sitting with my wife, and she gets a message from her college she went to. She went to a 4-year school in Ohio that was still very analog in how they did a lot of their registration. They did the three-page files where you have the white's the students, the gold goes to registration, and the pink goes to another group kind of thing. The 3-carbon paper kind of registration for classes. And that college said, we are going to be going digital. And then the next day, I remember getting a call from John Matula, and he said, be ready to take chemistry online. So my lecture videos were ready. I was like, yes, but I can tweak a few things. I had some simulation labs that I had built, and I had been getting familiar with PhET simulations. And I said, okay, we'll work on this. And with problem sets, I said, well, how can I work these online? Well, Blackboard Collaborate had been kind of a big thing that people were talking about in January of 2020. And so I'd started playing around with it a little bit. And I said, okay, let's start putting some lectures online here. But what I wasn't ready for was, how are my students going to turn in work? And I will tell you guys, going through 19 JPEG images, trying to grade an assignment is very difficult. I'm used to the 19 pages by hand, not the 19 pages that I ran into. There were 19 files that came in. It actually crashed my Blackboard for a little bit. I was kind of, oh no. I had to find a new way to work problems. How do I work my problems in chemistry now when I don't have, certain things that I had before? I'm actually pulling out a document camera or a webcam right now, because one thing that I learned is that if you use your web camera, you can point it down and treat it like a document camera from home. So I got creative in that method, and I still actually use that today to show work in a hand-rendered format for my students. And then, of course, testing. That was the big question. I know back in 2020, we had Respondus, but nobody really knew a lot about it. And there were a lot of issues with the feasibility, the usability. And so the Distance Education Committee worked on a presentation to move to HonorLock. And that's the Proctor service we use today, which allows us a lot of flexibility with student support, with the ability to use third-party exams. And of course, how do I get students to show work on exams when, in traditional fashion, you have Blackboard? How do you get that work show? So I had to kind of think about a lot of different things there. So during that time period, I adapted and adjusted. We moved to Collaborate sessions. I would hold virtual lecture sessions. My students would watch videos, and we would work problem sets together. That's very analogous to some of the things that were done by some of my colleagues in this very room. I know Aaron and Nancy, you guys did a lot of great things for anatomy. Aaron, you did a lot of great things with microbiology as well. Haley, I know you've done a lot of different things. Sibel, I know you've done a lot of things in your drafting area. And it's really neat to see what people have done with those different items. But because we came back in August of 2021, I didn't want to lose what we had built, because we had done a lot of great work. And I didn't want to just say, oh, that was a year and a half, it's gone, forget about it. We need to, keep these items and keep moving forward. So how do we change? How do we meet those learning objectives? How do we maintain that academic integrity? And how do we keep our coursework comparable across our multiple modalities were the big questions I began to ask. I began to look at my in-person lab manual for Chem 1405, and I said, are my simulations one-to-one comparable in my internet class with what I'm doing in the face-to-face? And so I began looking and building and designing different assignments and activities to help that out. I also wanted to make sure I maintained flexibility. Instead of taking assignments in at the beginning of class by paper, I started letting students upload their work through Blackboard. I'm not a big fan of the 11:59 p.m. deadline. I think Cinderella got it wrong a little bit there, mostly because I don't like the fact that when I wake up in the morning, I have 20 emails that are coming from students who are confused about submitting assignments when I've gone to bed, and the only time I want to wake up is if my 2 children are waking up in the middle of the night, kind of thing. But again, at the same time, I wanted to make sure I provided that avenue for students and that window or reminder of how to get submitted assignments turned in. So in addition to the due date, there's also the available after. So there's that opportunity to allow for a little bit of a grace period. If you miss the 11:59 p.m. window, you have till 8 a.m. that next morning to get stuff turned in. I've moved to digital grading. I leave feedback for all my assignments, and I have a digital record of that assignment being submitted in Blackboard. There is no argument anymore of, oh, well, I turned the assignment in on time when a student walks in 15 minutes late to class. I don't have that argument anymore. I've also looked at my assessment strategies. One of my colleagues, Dr. Gustavo Say, who's one of our adjunct faculty in the chemistry department, actually utilizes our laptop cart and does in-person tests using Blackboard exams that I've written. So he has the students complete the multiple choice portion in Blackboard and complete the open-ended questions on a separate sheet of paper and hand it to him before they leave so he can grade. We have virtual options for lab. If we have a student that misses class for an excused absence reason, we now have a virtual simulation that is comparable so that they have the ability to work on those assignments outside of class if they miss class. And finally, office hours. We have virtual office hours that I can do with students who cannot make it to campus on time. And conversely, with the remote work agreement that started about a year and a half ago, it's allowed me the opportunity to have a hybrid work schedule, which has allowed me to do virtual meetings with students from a virtual environment where I can work problems from home underneath a document camera and show them the examples of how those problems are worked. So there's a lot of new things that have happened, and it's really made higher education just really exciting. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about the changes, the growth, and everything we see there. Everybody good so far? Hanging in there? I'll take your silence as a yes. Great, awesome, loving it.
Oh,
So-
sorry, Brian. I have a quick question.
Sure, yes, ma'am.
Do you record your virtual office hours?
So yes and no. So in the past, what I started doing was I would work problems and I'd record those sessions. However, I know I'm engaging and can perform in front of a camera. It got very tiresome year after year to do the same sessions with nobody attending. So what I've done is I've actually saved a stock group of those virtual problem set sessions, and now I have them posted in Blackboard for all my modalities. So my face-to-face class, my hybrid class, my fully online classes, my intro Gen Chem 1 and Gen Chem 2 students all have access to these videos and can watch them in real time to get extra help with solving problems. Now I record review sessions for each exam. And what I've also suggested to students is if they want me to work a specific problem but cannot make the office hour, or if I have a student that comes to an office hour and wants me to work it, I will record it and share with my class. So about 3 weeks ago, I had a young lady ask me, can you work a problem solving for empirical formula? And so with empirical formula calculations, a lot of students have trouble with some of the rounding rules that take place because the rounding rules for empirical formula are a little different than traditional rounding rules, where if it's 0.5 and up, 0.5 and higher, you round up, and 0.4 and lower, you round down. So what I did is I actually worked out that problem that the student suggested on camera. I started out with this camera, and then I switched views to my other camera, and I was able to work that problem out with that student. So it was kind of exciting and pretty cool that I was able to do that with that student, and that student was able to go back and watch the video and said, thank you very much for, including that. And it was really neat to have that opportunity to help that student out.
Thank you. But you do not put it out there for other students to see, right?
Oh, I do. I do actually put it out. If it's a recording for a problem, I put it out for all the students. Now, if nobody comes to an office hour and I'm sitting there for about 20, 30 minutes, I won't record that session until, it's a question that, requires, some kind of calculation.
Thank you.
Oh, anytime, Sibel, anytime. So adapting and adjusting. So what I did is I moved from PowerPoint presentations to fillable lecture notes. I began working on this in the spring of 2020, and I first rolled it out in the fall of 2020 with an honors section of Chem 1405, where I would actually fill out the lecture notes with those students in Blackboard Collaborate. I've also moved those lecture videos into my online homework platform. We use the Achieve Homework Platform system. And so what I do is I actually am able to assign a grade for my students watching their lecture videos. So it's kind of like they get participation points for coming to class. And then I'm able to add follow-up questions. So for those of you guys, this is kind of analogous to back in the day when we were in school, where you'd read chapter 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. And there would be follow-up questions at the end of 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 that you would answer in the textbook that your professors may or may not have collected for a grade kind of thing. Problem sets, I began condensing. I used to do 15 problem sets. I've kind of moved down from 14 to now 11 problem sets. And again, that's just to get to a smaller number to help out with the 8-week transition. My next goal may be to transition even further down to 7 problem sets. That way there's 1 per week. That way there's not as much of this overload going on with our students who are having more challenges getting these problem sets done. For our labs and simulation labs, I've worked on trying to have a one-to-one approximation with what we do here at ACC with our simulation labs so that they match kind of the experiments that are done in our schedule. So for instance, we have a measurements lab and a density lab. I found different simulation activities that let me have students record and read measurements of mass, volume, temperature, and length. And so they're able to kind of read and record those measurements from their simulation or from their computer device. And then I've also had students that are able to interact with those activities. There are a few that the students do have to watch the videos for, unfortunately, but I am trying to find actual active activities where the student is actually doing the separation by clicking and making the mixture separate, or heating up the magnesium in the crucible for an empirical formula problem, or what's another good one that I have that's a video, or with a chemical flame test, maybe there's a simulation out there where you can actually see the different colors of the flame. So when potassium turns purple, barium turns yellow-green, copper turns that deep turquoise, all those kind of fun things. And I have moved into a digital format for my assessments. I still have the multiple choice and open-ended questions, and I require my students to submit their work to earn points for those open-ended questions. For exam 2, we just completed that in my hybrid and internet sections here for Chem 1405, and my students were able to upload their work within an hour of completing the exam. One thing that I've also had help is that with the external webcam that we use for our testing, for our chemistry department and for the other departments such as biology, anatomy, physiology, and microbiology, we are requiring an external webcam for proctoring that is positioned about 2 to 3 feet to the side of the student to help out with the proctoring process. And I'll get more into that as we go along. So here's kind of a couple excerpts of what I did with my fillable lecture notes. I went in to collaborate. I got very colorful, got very excited. I worked example problems, as you can see, with dimension analysis and density. I looked at some quantum mechanics with energy type problems, some stoichiometry, which is everybody's favorite thing in chemistry, and then some mole conversion examples of how I demonstrate those items. In my classes, what I've done is I've also provided a set of fillable lecture notes for my students to fill in. Now I'm off camera for a second, but I do have a book. I do have a book that allows my students to fill in their lecture notes, and I do have hard copies for my students. So if they want to come in and pick up a hard copy, I have no problem giving it to them. I have about 5 or 6 students from my online class that always take me up on that offer, and it's a great chance to put a face with a name to those students. Applying the grade, I've assigned my lecture videos as questions in my online homework platform. Now, clicking on the video doesn't earn the points, but rather I do have a statement in my question that says, I understand that the content and the material in this lecture video is going to be applicable to the assignment or to the course, and the content that you view in this video is, it is going to be material that could be tested on in your assessments. And while I've got that in mind, let me pull up kind of an example of what I mean by that in my Achieve homework by going into a student preview of that. So as I go over here and swing this over, here's an example of that. In my moles video set, which is video set 6, I have the lecture video here. The students are able to click on and watch the video. And then to earn the points, the students hit the agree statement. Now, because this assignment is past due, they can't click on it actually because it is past due kind of thing. But it is there for our students as well. Yes, Erin, I see you got your hand up. What can I do for you?
I just had a question. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't know if you wanted us to ask questions like during the presentation or wait till the. So on your fillable lecture notes that you have them do you count those for a grade? Like, is that part of their grade or is it not part of their grade?
I don't count them, but I do know other individuals that do something similar that will count them. Because I put the videos in the homework, that's how I count the points essentially. So I'm kind of giving them more of an honor system.
Right. I just was asking because you know what my course is like. You've seen it and stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
And so with mine, I've got the recorded narrated lectures, and I have reviews per chapter that they should be doing that will help them study for the exams. I obviously don't count them as a grade. And so, but I'm finding that, you know, I also provide the PowerPoint. And so I'm kind of at this situation now where I'm wondering, should I even provide the PowerPoint? Because if I don't provide the PowerPoint, that may force them to watch the narrated, because we've had this discussion. You know, it's all out there, but they don't use the resources available to them. And then they wonder why they didn't do well on an exam or whatnot. And I'm like, well, you didn't watch any of the narrated lectures. And so, anyway, that's why I was just asking about, you know, if you counted that for a grade or not, because I'm still kind of pondering in my own head as to whether or not to provide the PowerPoints to try to get them to watch the narrated lectures.
So I know Esther will have her students take notes. She doesn't provide the PowerPoints, but she has our students take notes for Chem 1411, Chem 1412, and for her organic classes. So I do know that is a possibility. I've just kind of chosen this route. There are some benefits to it. I do get, I'd like the fact that I'm able to get the videos into Achieve and that they're able to see the problems, and they're able to kind of, after they watch the videos, they're able to kind of see how those videos help them out with solving those questions. But again, it's just kind of it's an instructor choice thing. So I don't want to say you have to do it this way or that way. Everybody finds their own unique way of doing things, and that's the beauty of it, is that freedom to kind of have that choice to make it work.
Right. Thank you so much.
Anytime, always. All right. And so the biggest struggle I have, and I know here at ACC we're fortunate because we have inclusive access, but at Lone Star College, I don't have that inclusive access agreement. So when I do the same thing at Lone Star College with their online homework, I have the challenge of students who, after their 2-week free access, don't have the ability to pay for those materials. We are looking into some options at that campus as well. So for any of you guys who are visiting from other campuses, those 2-week free accesses do help. And I think they'll help a lot more in the 8-week classes versus the 16-week, because it's a much more fast-paced course. So after 2 weeks, 25% of the course is finished rather than just 12.5%. All right. So with the problem session videos, I took 2 kind of screenshots of problem sessions that I do. So I took a solution problem, and then I took a wavelength, frequency, and energy problem. But I do have full videos of myself solving these problems for my students. And they do come directly from my problem sets. In my face-to-face and hybrid courses, I work these problem sets live with my students. So there's a portion of them that are done in class, and then the remaining portion is done as homework. I try not to work the entire problem set because I want to give my students a chance to practice on their own. So that's kind of one of the other things that I kind of, you know, keep an eye on as I'm working them. But there are always those cases where, you know, we may have a little extra time, and we're able to kind of jump in and do a few more problems. And so I do have these recordings posted, and I have them for my face-to-face and hybrid courses themselves. So there's a lot of different options that are there. I do like the model of having the problem session videos recorded and posted ahead of time. But at the same time, if a student wants me to work a problem live with them, I have no problem doing that in an online modality or even in person. Now, everybody gets a kick out of this, but in my online class one semester, I had 4 students who always came to campus and always wanted help in person. And in my hybrid and face-to-face classes, those students always wanted a virtual meeting. I know, go figure, right? One of those interesting things that we've seen. So talking about that itself and talking about those ideas, I want to make sure that I give my students those opportunities to, you know, have that extra practice and have those videos that they can go back and view. And they've done a really good job of kind of seeing what those problems are and what they're worked. I also will change a problem here and there in my problem sets so that I know if a student is actually watching the videos, I'll know, oh, they made that correction on that problem set, because instead of calculating for the molar mass of gallium, they're now calculating the molar mass of indium. So have a little fun with that kind of thing. As far as the testing experience goes, we are using AutoLock Lockdown Browser here. And I know, Aaron, you're doing the external webcam, and Cindy, I'm glad you're here as well, because you're also doing it, I believe. And so kind of talking about this whole idea itself, this was born out of a conversation that Chris Polito and I had one day about cheating and academic integrity. So I know in anatomy and physiology, you guys are trying to make sure you protect the integrity of your online classes, and students are trying to find ways around that integrity, which is unfortunate because we want our students, you know, who are going into these healthcare professions to show that integrity, because you're going to be taking care of patients. So one suggestion I had to Chris was, well, why don't we move the perspective from this view to a different view? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and see if this will work. I'm going to see if I can switch my camera real fast on you guys. But let's see if we switch it. So now I've switched kind of my camera perspective. And what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to take off my background for just a second to show you guys kind of what I mean by the perspective of our camera view. So I'm going to use my coffee mug to help out here a little bit as well. But what we've done is we've adjusted the view, and this is not the best view. So sorry, Aaron, I know this is not the best view in the world, but we've adjusted the view so that it's a little bit
You
to
need
the
to
side.
push it out a little further, Brian.
I'm running out of room. I'm running out of real estate. There we go.
I'm just kidding.
I know. I'm running out of real estate here. But what we've done is we have a better view of our students' proctoring experience. So in chemistry, if my students are working an exam, I can see them physically working the exam. I have the evidence or the proof that they're working those problems on paper. I've had some students that do more of a bird's eye view, which is pretty awesome. I've had some students that do kind of a side profile, like a 3 o'clock or a 9 o'clock view. That also works as well. And so with those different views, you're able to help see the exam a little bit more clearly in the proctoring space. So if a student was to pull out their cell phone, it's a little easier to see. Now, I'm a little bit more, I'm not as zoomed out as I wish I could be, but you could see it a lot more easily with that idea. And I know this is actually a practice. Wharton College actually has this practice in place. I've talked to Amy Accord and Brady Hutchison, and they mentioned from Wharton that they were able to do that too. And yeah, it does. It definitely removes a lot of the doubt, and it makes the viewing of the webcam experience a lot better. The other thing too, I know HonorLock put out an information about the Logitech C270 camera. The only thing that the Logitech C270 camera is not allowing is the ID scan. So what we tell our students is we have them switch back to their fixed camera perspective instead. So we have them switch back to their fixed camera. Let me go back and put my background back on again, because that would be fun to have that cool chemistry background here. And so talking about that itself, having that fixed camera to take the picture, that helps out a lot there too. The other thing that I've done with my students is the question of, well, what about the periodic table? Do I have to memorize the periodic table? Do I have to memorize the polyatomic ions? And the answer to that is no. I've actually created a formula web page for my students that allows students to navigate and look at the periodic table, their formulas and constants for the exam, their polyatomic ions for naming and formula writing. We're about to hit solubility rules and solutions next week in our solutions chapter, and the activity series, which answers the age-old question, will this metal replace that metal in a reaction kind of thing? And for my students, I've made it an accessible website for the exam so the students can access the exam itself. Now, I do have to remind students that these links here are not accessible during the HonorLock exam. So I have had students that have tried to click on these links and they're denied. And so I have to tell students you have to scroll a little bit. And so when I tell them to scroll, they go, oh. So I try to model it in virtual sessions or in my hybrid class when we're meeting in person. And I would say it's been pretty successful so far. It helped me out because for a long time I had a lot of trouble getting formulas for my students. And yes, Cindy, I definitely agree with that. I definitely like having that ability to see things. The other thing that I had to do is get creative with labs. Now, I don't have too much time, really. I've only got 25 minutes left, and I don't want to, take too much time away from you guys. So I'm going to pick about 2 simulations that I've done that help the students out. So what I did is I went and used everybody's favorite search engine, Google, and I typed in, how do I find simulations for chemistry? So for precipitation reactions, a lot of times we take 2 soluble substances. Like, for instance, I can take, say, calcium nitrate. A bunch of calcium nitrates will float around. And then I can throw in some sodium carbonate over here. And we can saturate it. And what ends up happening is when the right pieces come together, we get a precipitate that forms. So calcium carbonate is one of the products of the reaction. And that precipitate forms in solution. And it gives the students a nice live demonstration of that setup. Another one that is here is a titration lab. So with a titration lab, you can titrate a strong acid and a strong base. So for instance, if I want to titrate a 1.0 molar hydrochloric acid against a 0.75 molar sodium hydroxide, I can use any indicator I want. Since I've got a strong acid, strong base, I'm going to go with bromothymol blue. I'm going to put acid in the burette, and I can even show my equivalence point of my titration. I'll click add the solutions to the flask in the burette. And when I add it here, I can see the titration curve beginning to form. And let me speed up this drop rate for you guys. It's a little bit faster here. But it'll show my inflection point and where my equivalence point is. So it actually shows the titration simulation and gives the students an opportunity to kind of read and follow that titration itself. Another one that's also cool is a graduated cylinder challenge lab that I found where you can actually read measurements. So if I type in BB for my initials, you can actually get the chance to practice reading the measurements. So you read the meniscus of the graduated cylinder. And so here it looks like we've got 800, then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. So it looks like we're going up by like 20s. So we can call this about 820 milliliters. And you can even check your work to see if it's right or wrong. Now, to complement that, I have my students fill out a lab sheet that goes along with it. So with these lab simulations, I've worked on adding a lab simulation activity worksheet that the students are able to fill in different things. So for this lab, substance 1 they would record as purple, substance 2 they could record as blue, and they could record their volume. And then along with it, I have follow-up questions that go along with these items, including doing some conversions from milliliters to fluid ounces to practice the dimension analysis piece. All right, and there was one more that I really, really like. Here it is, activity series. With our activity series for chemistry, we're limited to only about 3 or 4 metals. We can use magnesium, copper, zinc, and I think iron. But in our activity series in the simulation, we can actually use more different metals. So I go back home here and go to activity 2. We can use lead, we can use nickel, and we can even use tin. And we can build an activity series here for those different items. So for instance, if I want to test the activity series with, say, tin, I have 10 solutions here. I hit continue, and it dips them into the solutions. So I can see whether the single displacement reaction takes place or not. And if I look at the molecular scale, I can see that the iron ions react with the tin. They do not. If I go to the molecular level with the tin and the lead, I can see that, oh, there's exchange taking place. And so what happens is the tin is now precipitate, or is now an ion solution, and the lead is now, now the lead is coming out as the solid that forms a precipitate. Excuse me. Let me get my terminology right here. I can also see here that tin does not react with tin, kind of thing. So there's a lot of cool things we can do with these simulation labs. And again, I prepared little activities that go along with them on Word, little worksheets to help my students out with these different assignments. I've got a couple other ones that are here in the video with different simulations. And if anybody's interested, I'm willing to share some of my simulations with you guys to see how I've written them and how I put them together, kind of thing. So, answering a big question, how do I apply all these things to different modalities? How can I apply these to face-to-face, hybrid, online, and even in 8 weeks? Well, for face-to-face, a lot of these lab simulations are great if I have a student that misses a lab class because of a doctor's appointment, a death in the family, illness, or, car trouble, or, pet trouble. I know recently we had a big surgery for one of my dogs. Poor Frodo had a cancer in his leg. He's doing great now. He's actually adapted and adjusted, and he is the fastest tripod I've ever seen in my life now. But, again, if a student has some kind of situation similar to that, we want to make sure that we try to help them out with, being in the lab. It's a lot more difficult to make up a lab, especially here at ACC, because we're putting away a lot of our lab materials and equipment after each class so we can make room for the next experiments. So for hybrids, we can define a hybrid as a course where in-person learning covers between 15 to 50% of the courses and a course's contact hours. I think this is something defined by the AGCM, and I know it's definitely defined in our faculty handbook. For science courses that have been taught in hybrid format, we typically stuck to a 100% in-person lab and 100% online lecture. I've made some adjustments to that model, and that's really helped with my 8-week courses here at ACC going to a true 50-50. I have focused on the most essential lecture components and the most essential lab components that need to be hands-on. And with that true 50-50, in a 3-hour meeting, the first hour and a half is problem solving, and the second hour and a half is getting into the lab and doing the experiments. I know other people have done great examples of hybrids. Brittany Bewick did her first 5-week microbiology hybrid in the summer, and she said it was a fantastic experience getting the students into the lab and having them do the lecture online, and that works great for micro. I know for physics, our Physics 1410 course, Dr. Mosmel Hussein is teaching that one. He does a really good job with the lab experiments, and he's also started weaving in some extra problem solving, and I think he does his exams in person. Some other things we've done with our hybrid courses, this spring semester in our second 8 weeks, we're engaging in a 25% lab course where 25% is in person and 75% is online. So the most essential labs are meeting in person. And to make sure we make up that 48 contact hours for lab, we are moving a couple of our labs to a virtual format for that course. So there will be about 10 in-person labs in that 8-week, 14, 11, 25% hybrid. And then there are going to be about 5 or 6 simulation labs that are done outside of that. For the lecture portion, there's going to be a weekly problem session meeting. I'll hold weekly session meetings to help students out with any questions or concerns. We'll do exam reviews every other week for the 3 exams that are going to be held. And I'll have my lecture problem session videos posted that'll be available for my students as well. What I think I'm going to do as well for this semester, instead of putting the problem session videos in a separate folder, I'm going to put the problem session videos either with the problem set or directly above or beneath it. I'm also piloting Blackboard Ultra with this group, so I'm excited to see how the Blackboard Ultra interface is going to work with this group as well as my second 8-week hybrid. It's worked pretty good in the 8-week internet class I'm doing so far. So the question that has come up is, how do I add a synchronous meeting without making it synchronous? Because again, these are asynchronous online courses that we're teaching, but we want to make sure that we have a bit of a presence for our students. So my thought process when I set up a weekly meeting is, number one, I make sure to stress that my meetings are not mandatory. So if a student wants to come to the meeting, that's great. If a student doesn't want to come to the meeting, that's okay too. Nothing that is required for the course is going to be covered in there. It's more of a help session or problem solving session that'll be available for students. And what I always do is I try to record those sessions, especially if there's sessions where we're going to be solving problems, going over review info for an exam, or answering specific questions that have application to the whole student class itself. Now, there are some sessions where I may have a student ask a specific question that needs to be more private between me and that student. So those sessions I don't record. But if it's something that's going to be beneficial to the class, like for instance, there's an achieve question that students are having a little trouble with, I may troubleshoot that problem. I like to push recorded scripted sessions out for my students. I have a folder in my lecture content that has those recorded sessions available. I also tell my students, hey, if you can't make it and you want me to cover something, send me an email and I'll cover it for you guys. Again, I mentioned earlier the empirical formula question. I had another student at another campus ask me to cover a concentration conversion going from mole fraction to molarity, molality, and percent mass. And I was able to help out with that question itself. The final thing I like to do is I make sure that I share my recordings within 24 hours of the conclusion of those sessions. That way students are able to come see those videos as quickly as possible. I also try to make sure that my face is present in those sessions. So my camera's on. So even when I'm in my remote space, I try to make sure my camera's on. Even if I use the document camera or the face down camera that's on the that's showing for my students, I try to make sure that I'll wave my hand down there and be like, hey guys, I'm here. Pardon my fingernails. I know they're not the best. All that good stuff. 8-week versus 16-week. There's a lot of questions, concerns. I know we've been running 8-week courses in many of our other disciplines here on campus, and the sciences are starting to bring a few more 8-week courses into the schedule. But it's half the time and it's the same content. And I know that sounds scary and challenging, but you still have the same number of meetings with your students. You're still going to make those same number of contact hours with your students. It's just we've got to put more of our emphasis on making sure that our students are, learning the material, taking advantage of the study time that needs to be done. And one thing I will say, use those SLOs to guide you. We do have a lot of SLOs we need to cover, but those SLOs guide our teaching. They guide our methodologies. They're our map of what needs to be done. And when you're looking at ways to condense or rearrange assignments, don't cut content. I didn't cut any content. I refuse to cut content. I have made sure, though, to rearrange my material so that maybe I have a few less assignments kind of thing. And so talking about that itself, what I adjusted is instead of having multiple small videos that are out there for my students where I have, say, 30 assignments that are graded and achieved, I've moved to just 15 assignments and then 3 or 4 or 5 unit reviews for my students to help get them ready for the exam. So smaller chunks, but then they also get some of the similar questions that are out there. For my problem sets, I went from 14 and 15 to about 11, which has helped out with the problem solvings as well for my students. And for the labs, I'm trying to, find ways to trim down on some of those assignments as well. Maybe asking one or two fewer questions on the lab, but still maintaining some of the key rigor and key measurements that are necessary. And how's that look for my classes? Well, I have higher engagement. In the past, when I've taught 16-week courses, I maybe have 2 to 3 hours in total where students come to office hours. And this is across my multiple sections that I teach, where I have just 2 to 3 total hours in a semester where students come in and ask for help. Now with the 8-week model, I have students that come in weekly. I have a young lady in my hybrid course who meets me Thursdays at 2:30. I have another lady who comes in on Tuesdays at 12:30. I have students that meet with me on Mondays or Wednesdays during virtual sessions. I know at 12 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays when I start my office hours, I have to be on the lookout for one of my students because she likes to call me on Teams, and we get 20 minutes of problem solving done. It's pretty awesome. What I've also seen as well is with that engagement, I've seen increased success rates in my Chem 1405 course. So traditionally, I have about a 70 to 75% success rate in my Chem 1405 course, the 75% being A, B, and C. It's a little bit higher with my 1405 hybrid course in 8 weeks, where it's gone up to about 80%. And I would say right now for my hybrid course that I'm doing in 8 weeks, it's on track for about 80, 85. The internet course is going to need a little more help. It's about in the 60s to 65% range, which is about comparable with what my internet section is for Chem 1405 online. It's usually in that mid to upper 60s as well. So I am going to try to work on some different options to try to help out with student retention, getting students to get assignments turned in a little bit quicker. I think one of the obstacles we ran into is because of that freeze that first day, students were a little bit behind the 8 ball starting on the Wednesday. We didn't have a session until the first Thursday. And a lot of students like to come to that first session, but then they don't come to any other session. So missing out that first day kind of made things a little bit more challenging. Haley, I know you can probably say this. Cindy, you can say this. In an 8-week course, students are on top of those assignments on day 1, and they have to be. That census day is on that first Monday of the second week. I'm seeing a lot more connections that are being made. Students are remembering their nomenclature rules for stoichiometry, and some of you guys are wondering, well, why is that important? Well, in stoichiometry, you have a lot of word problems, and you're not always going to have lead-2 nitrate spelled out as PB parentheses NO3 parentheses 2. So students have to make those connections between previous unit items to get to these later items. I've also seen in my 16-week classes, there's a boredom level that kind of sets in about week 8, 9, 10 after that second exam has been completed. And with the 8-week course, that boredom is not there. It is off. It is to the races. We got this. It is grease lightning pretty much. For those of y'all who remember Six Flags Astroworld, you are go, 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 go kind of thing. Now, where my students need a little bit more support is finding different things, especially in the online class. They need a little more support finding those different items and navigating the course. You can put up a navigation video, but not everybody's going to click on it. Problem solving do's and don'ts. So for instance, Googling conversion factors on an exam, I don't give the feet to meters conversion directly because I want to see students make that connection of going from feet to miles, miles to kilometers, and then kilometers to meters. And then of course I find myself being a cheerleader. So that's the biggest thing I have to tell students. Y'all have the skills. Y'all have the ability. You just need the confidence. It's okay. You guys can do this. And that's one of the big things I've seen here. One of my syllabi actually at San Jacinto College, I saw this semester, was kind of a section on being a cheerleader for your students and being a champion for your students, saying, hey guys, you've got this. You're great. I send out regular announcements. I'm more obnoxious than your dentist. I send 3 announcements per week a lot of times. And a lot of times I try to send those reminders for assignments. Here's what's coming up due. Here's some things to watch out for. Here's a reminder about submitting assignments. Here's a reminder about the upcoming exam. In a few weeks, here's a reminder about your course evaluations for this class. Send me feedback. Let me know. I'm not going to be offended. This is the first time I've done this 8-week internet section and the second time I've done the 8-week hybrid section. I want feedback. I'm not offended. It's okay. I've seen enough on wreckmyprofessor.com to get it. And yes, Nancy, I stole that from you directly because that's what it is. So, in our 8-week online and hybrid modalities and just any modality overall, the obstacles I've had to overcome, number one is the everything is due on Sunday mentality. Because of how chemistry and other science courses build on themselves, and this is the same thing for psychology, for drafting, and any other subject you guys are teaching, everything built on itself. What you learned in chapter 1 is massively applicable to chapter 2. I mean, you can't name a compound without knowing how to read a periodic table. You can't do stoichiometry without being able to do dimension analysis. You can't do a formal lab report without having practice writing conclusions. Ooh, I like that Dear Chemist, actually. That's pretty cool. I'm going to have to try that one day. It's like the Dear Kitten videos that are on YouTube, for those of y'all who remember those, where they've got like, I think it's the Whiskers commercials or the cat litter commercial. Yeah, I like that. Maintain your boundaries. Stick to your syllabus policies. I have a really bad habit of checking emails after I put my away message up, and I'm trying to get better. In fact, that's what I'm trying to give up for Lent this year, is being more mindful of sticking to those, policies and syllabus expectations. And so for me, sticking to those syllabus expectations, if you don't take late work, explain why you don't take late work. If you have drop grades in place, let your students know, hey, if you miss this assignment, there's a drop grade in place for you guys. Hey guys, if you have a 7-day window, you have a 7-day window to complete your work. So start earlier in the window. Start on Tuesday or Wednesday as opposed to Thursday or Friday. And in an 8-week course, there are 96 hours you have to do. Exposure time is a big one. Brittany Bewick makes a big focus on this one when she teaches her online AMP class, exposure time versus study time. Just because you're exposed to the material, that's not necessarily study time. That's the time you would be in class learning that subject. And then, of course, there's the getting in hands. It's the getting your students to follow directions. You can only do so much. I had a student this semester. He is unfortunately going to have to withdraw from my 8-week internet section, who has had a lot of trouble trying to figure out how to submit his assignments in a PDF or Word document format. We've gone over different expectations. I've directed him to videos online. I've had Teams calls with him. I've had phone calls with him. I've even asked if he was able to come to campus to meet. But unfortunately, we're not able to get that in-person meeting in place. But there's only so much you can do with the reading and following directions. At the end of the day, give it the best you guys can. I mean, you want to try to make sure you reach your students the best you guys can, but sometimes you can't go 110. You can't go over that 110-mile that limit. Sometimes the students have to take responsibility for their learning and their work itself. And then finally, the hands-on experience itself is a big one. Students don't understand the online nature sometimes, and I get a lot of questions. How does an online science class work? Are we going to do labs at home? And so the hands-on side comes from engaging the material. On the faculty side of things, I know not everybody shares the passion for teaching online, teaching hybrids in 8 weeks. And my philosophy is you don't have to like, doing different things. Everybody has their strengths. Everybody has their abilities and skill sets, but be respectful of people's passions. And I take this from Cindy and Jennifer's talk, but the whole grit mindset. You may have something that, someone else may not like that you're doing, and vice versa. I mean, we all can learn a lot of different things from each other, but just don't force your, perspectives or goals on other people. If you are teaching online, though, we have that perception that online instruction may not be as, the quality may not be as great. It takes a lot of time to build a class. It takes even more time to go back and revise the class. I remember doing a presentation for our leadership about General Chemistry 1 online, and one of the things that struck one of our former VPIs was, oh, wow, the time you take to build this course is immense. The time you take to engage with students, the time you take to build these labs, it takes a lot of time. And guys, I know we're stuck on those 3 or 4 students that are not succeeding in our course, but let's champion the people that are succeeding. Let's champion the people who are, doing what they're supposed to do, doing great work. This is awesome. Write a great job. I find myself, whenever I see somebody that gets 100 on an assignment, I'm trying to be more mindful of writing, this is great work. Or I really like that pink color you used when you did your video core problem. We found ways to safeguard or try to cheat the academic integrity side of things with webcam placement, open-ended questions, work submissions, the video core assessment problem that I do for my class. Those are all great items to help out with assessing knowledge. And finally, the AGCM is a big thing too. I know with a lot of these lab classes, meeting those AGCM standards is a huge concept. And do our simulations meet the standards? I believe they do. The AGCM itself does not say by hand, and so demonstrating some of these skill sets is there. Remember, guys, we are a community college. We are here to serve our community and serve our students. Now, I know that some students are going to need those hands-on skills, but they'll get a lot of those hands-on skills when they go into their upper level classes or their next level course. But we do the best we can with the students that are present in our courses. And for me, one experience that I've had is when I've taught online Gen Chem 1, the students that take Gen Chem 2 in person have done really well with the technical aspects of our General Chemistry 2 course. They have done great with measuring the Vernier software or running the Vernier software. they've done a great job of, figuring out how to measure things in a graduated cylinder or a test tube or an Erlenmeyer flask. They have picked up on those skills that, you learned in Gen Chem 1. There's a little more patience that's involved, but again, patience and grace, that's what we're here for here at ACC. Remember, we choose kind. I've got the Choose Kind shirt underneath my ACC polo today because that's what we're here for. We're here to support our students and their learning. So again, do we meet the SLOs? Are we meeting the contact requirements? And does it meet the academic integrity standards of the college? Those are the questions that I ask myself when I talk about supporting my students. What am I doing to help meet those student needs? So as I kind of close things out, talking about chemistry and talking about goals for chemistry, I want to try to get as much interaction and simulations as possible. I don't want my students to just watch videos. In 2020 of December, we lost Adobe Flash, and a lot of my simulations for Gen Chem 2 were in that Adobe Flash modality. So I have been looking for HTML5 conversion files. I've been looking for simulations that are more hands-on. The titration lab that I put together is actually the second version of a titration lab that I had. And I like this one because it does a nice job of keeping it more simplified. But the titration lab that I had originally that ran on Adobe Flash had more strong acids, more weak acids, more strong bases and weak bases to look at. It even had the ability to do sulfuric acid titrations and phosphoric acid titrations to get multiple inflection points. I'm also looking at revamping my problem sets. I want to revamp Gen Chem 1, Intro Chem, and Gen Chem 2 so that those problems don't appear on Course Hero or these other places that are out there. With the video core problems, I want to rotate a series of topics so it's not the same problems again and again. And my next big frontier is organic chemistry. In the 9 years I've been here at ACC, I've only taught organic once, and I hope that I get the opportunity to teach organic in the future, and that way we can kind of rotate it back and forth within the department. That way you have two instructors that are fresh on the content and fresh on the material. And implementing some cool things, you can look at hybrid models for organic chemistry with fillable lecture notes. You could look at different ideas or different directions or thought processes itself, and then also looking for some alternate makeup labs. I know at Lone Star College, they have an online organic chemistry section. I don't know what they're doing for the lab experiments. I haven't had a chance to ask anybody yet. But again, looking for some of those online virtual labs to help students that may not be able to make a lab class for organic. Because I don't know about you guys, organic chemistry labs are pretty lengthy. When I took organic at the University of Houston, I had a 6-hour lab class for organic 1 and 2. It gets pretty intense. And so some other things that I'm looking at, well, it just kind of depends on what's out there. And so, folks, I'll leave you with that. But that's kind of the end of my talk. And I know I'm only going about 2 minutes for questions. So I do apologize for kind of getting a little long-winded there. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts, here's your moment.
You are on top of it, Brian.
I try, guys. I try.
I just was going to chime in on the webcam placing.
Yes.
I will tell you, I do. I highly support the side view. I feel like we are constantly trying to find. We were just talking about it this morning. There are, new ways that students are implementing to I'm trying to say this in a nice way, but they are trying to go around the system, and we find that more and more and more, especially when students get desperate and they feel like there's no other way out, and I get that. So I just feel like the at least the side webcam view, I started using it this semester, and it's a much better viewpoint from our angle to be able to see the students actually doing the test without using any additional resources. And so I very much support that.
Oh no, I'm so glad we kind of came up with the idea. We were spitballing in the office. Chris was talking about another webcam viewing for his online A&P class, the frustrations of trying to get the testing done, having to move students in person because they were making questionable movements or questionable questionable things. And I just said, well, why don't we just take the perspective away from this instead of looking like Wilson? I'm going to date myself here for you home improvement fans out there. We now have a better view. And I hope that the view I showed was halfway decent. Aaron and Cindy, I know you both are doing the webcam placement. I know that that's worked out well. It's made me feel better. I mean, obviously you're not going to catch everybody, but you have a better catch-all, and it's a better field of view for our students. In fact, I'm actually going to be doing webcam views probably during the student panel today, so I can see who actually got their webcam ready for exam 2.
I do feel better about it because none of us wants to accuse anybody of doing anything wrong. But at the same time, I know we all are trying to uphold the integrity of our courses and of the exams and whatnot. And so it's a really bad feeling having to call somebody and accuse them of doing something that, you know, they shouldn't be doing. And so I really like this angle much better because then I feel like I can see what I need to see.
Definitely. I agree with that too. And I know, Cindy, you're doing it in psychology. Are you the only one in psychology doing the webcam placement right now, or is anybody else doing it?
As far as I know, I'm the only one.
Okay, I need to talk to Jen. I'm going to get Jen on it. In our department, I know that Aaron and I are doing it. Brittany's doing it. Chris is doing it. Heather Lewis is doing it. And then Philip O'Brien, who is teaching a geology course for us, is doing it as well. So there are 6 of us over here.
Brandy, our new
Oh, and
instructor.
Brandy. Yeah, I forgot about Brandy. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Sorry, Brandy.
Right. We have it for nutrition, A&P, micro, and then
Chemistry and geology.
chemistry and general biology. Yes, pretty much
And
all
yeah.
of our.
We just need to get some cameras.
Oh, what was that, Cindy? I couldn't catch you.
Oh, hold on. Need to get some new cameras or get more cameras so students that can't afford to buy one have access to one. So.
Oh yeah. Hey, Cindy, I'm going to send you. We did Aaron led a really nice kind of webcam search. Aaron, I'm going to give you as many props as I can today. She did a really nice webcam search, and she found a couple of different webcam options that are a little cheaper than the Logitech C270 that don't have the issue with the ID scan.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that'd be great. I'm trying
Oh, yeah.
something different this semester. So I didn't do the at-home exams with my hybrid classes. I'm going to
Yeah.
see how this goes, but I'm actually having them do like a PowerPoint presentation or a
Okay.
podcast where they're having, I mean, that's the goal, right? Is to see that they have the material. So I want to see them articulate and apply the terms and comments. So I'm trying that this semester as a midterm. I may not like it. In fact, just looking through them, I'm going, oh, I don't know. I may go back to the webcam, but
So
just trying things out.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies growing up was Princess Diaries, and I like the scene when Anne Hathaway and her mom are throwing paint at the wall. That's what we got to do as educators sometimes. Sometimes we got to throw paint at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm using the core assessment paper as kind of like to build off of that, an oral presentation, so I can use that in the PLOs or the core assessment stuff.
Oh yeah.
So we'll see.
I'm excited, definitely. Well, folks, we are about 4 minutes over time, and I know we could just chat all day long because, that's just awesome, but I'm sure some of you guys have tummies that are rumbling, and I want to go beat Nancy to the microwave. Sorry, Nancy.
Thanks, Brian. Good job.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And Haley, you're going to end the
Bye-bye.
recording, right?
Have a good weekend, Brian.
Yes, I'm doing that
Thanks,
right now.
See
guys.
you next time in the other one.
Always. All right. Thanks, guys. And Haley, you got the recording?